my name is Amy Nat. I am the CEO of Aging Outreach Services, and this is All Things Aging. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by a couple of people from our local Southern Pines Police Department. We have Charles Campbell, who is a Deputy Chief of Police, and we have Bill List, who is a Community Services Coordinator. Today, we are going to be talking about senior scams, and we're going to talk about how to recognize them and potentially how to prevent those. And so we'll just start off by talking about, why do you think that the older population is sometimes a target of these scams?
Sure. So, Bill and I were talking about this earlier because there is unfortunately a large increase in these types of calls that we deal with. We think that this population that's being targeted, they're just so trustworthy.
Right. They're
so honest. And at that stage in their life, they're probably not looking for a hard time. So It's easy to target someone who is, I trust everybody. And I'm at a point in my life, I don't need this to happen. So how do I make it go away, or how do I deal with it effectively and quickly? And that sometimes just opens them up for these things. So, and Bill was also talking about earlier about how they're at a stage in their life to where they have money. They've worked their whole lives, right? And so people know that. People know that, hey, look, they've got their retirement centers and they've got all their different investments. And so they may look at younger population and say, they're just starting, so they don't have these resources yet. So, Bill, anything else?
Oh, and the other thing, too, is technology-wise.
Right.
They don't tend to be usually as savvy as normal.
They're intimidated by it a little bit.
Right, as the younger group. So they're more apt to maybe click on something they shouldn't, or believe that a site is legitimate when it's not legitimate, things like that.
That makes sense. And we see that definitely a lot in the work we do with older adults. What do you think are some of the best ways to recognize if something is a scam? If you're not really sure, you're not tech savvy, it's hard to tell junk mail from real mail. All these things they deal with. What are some good ways that they can recognize a scam?
Well, when I'm giving a presentation, I always recommend asking a loved one too, right? If you get an email, if you get a phone call, check with somebody first. Don't just assume that the person is legitimate on the other end. Doing that, but also a couple of things, if you get something out of the blue, right? And like all of a sudden you get a phone call that says they're from the IRS and that you owe, $5,000 in back taxes, but this is the first you've ever heard of it. Right. Something that pops up like that without any kind of mail or anything to validate it.
Especially if you filed your taxes.
Correct.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Something like that. Money transfers, wire transfers, and gift cards are another big thing.
Gift cards are one we hear a lot about now.
Yeah. And I always tell people, no legitimate organization is going to ask for gift cards. They're just not. A bank, government, nobody's going to ask you for a gift card. So if somebody asks you for that, it's a scam 100% of the time. That's a big red flag.
One of the things we also see is that they are getting calls from reported government entities. We know in our business, government.
I was going to say, do those entities actually pick up the phone and call you?
They don't. No, the IRS is not going to call you and ask you. They're going to send you some sort of official notification. Law enforcement is not going to call you and say, hey, look, we have a warrant. You need to pay this over the phone. That's not going to happen. So a lot of times, one of the immediate indicators is you got a phone call.
Yeah.
So what we say is, if you don't know it and you don't have a family member, call us.
Yeah.
Because we've probably got a dozen phone calls at that time, and we can say, no, that's a scam.
What about text messages? I have people say, I got this text message. Is that usually a red flag, or?
It is, because again, the government's not going to send you, any sort of notification. We run through a company, it's called VC3.
Okay.
And that's where we do fraud notifications, and also not only fraud notifications, but identity theft.
Okay.
And so when we go through that, all the things that they're telling us is, these entities are not going to call somebody. They're not going to send them a text. They're going to get some certified mail, or they're going to get some official service of a notice or something of that type. They're not going to get a text or a call. So again, if you ever have a question, ask.
Yeah.
Just ask that.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. About 20 minutes before we got here, I got a text message that said I had overdue tolls that I had to pay. Yeah,
I think that's going
so
around.
that's a big one. And then also saying that your package hasn't been delivered by the post office.
And you're supposed to click on it. So links in general probably are not a good
links
job.
Links are bad, yes.
To click on. Okay. So can you tell us about some of the more, we've touched on some of them, but some of the more common types of scams that people might look out for?
Sure. It fluctuates. It comes and goes depending on the trend at the time. But what we're getting right now is a lot of the jury duty. And I say IRS or jury duty. They kind of run the same way. But you'll get a phone call usually saying that they're from an agency and either that you missed jury duty or, like I said, you owe back taxes and they want to handle it and get it taken care of. And how they ask you to do that is through gift cards. And again, red flags should go up.
Never go with the gift card. Okay.
A lot of times what they do that to play on emotions though, right? Because nobody wants to find out they had a warrant for their arrest or that they owe.
And that generation typically are rule followers.
Correct. So that's a big one. Utility scams were going around for a while.
Okay. What is that?
So that was saying that there's either a rebate that you qualify for, or you missed a payment for your utility, Duke Energy, something like that. And again, they want to take care of that for you
right away. Yeah.
So, and a lot of times that's as easy as just contacting the company who allegedly that came from. I contacted Duke when that was coming about, and they said, we apply all rebates directly to people's accounts. We don't contact.
We're not coupling desk. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the more popular one too is that you will get some sort of a notification in the mail that an account has been opened up in your name. And that's very prevalent now. And what these scammers are doing is they're going to a bank that says, we'll give $50 if you open a checking account with us.
Okay.
And then they get these personal information. They open all of these checking accounts. They take the $50 out or transfer it, and then they just discard the information. And then a resident will say, well, I got this in the mail. I've got a PIN number, or I got a
seems legitimate. Yeah.
It seems legitimate, and it is because the account was open in their name. So again, contact us. We'll do the report and go through the reporting process with you, because those are legitimate accounts that are being opened.
They need to be closed.
And they need to be closed.
We hear the term phishing scam a lot. Explain what that means for someone who's not familiar.
Right. So I always joke that phishing is not my favorite.
It's literally
phishing, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing, right?
Okay.
It's PH instead of the S. But what they do is they're phishing for information.
Okay.
So that is going to be you might get an email out of the blue that wants to verify some information, asks you to click on a link. And then when you click on that link, you fill out that information thinking that you're
doing something correct.
You're doing it legitimate. And then that scammer will either do one or two things. They either sell your information off to somebody who will try to scam you, or they'll use it to scam you themselves.
Yeah, that's cool.
We even get them in the town where we'll get an email and it says it's from the mayor. And the mayor wants you to respond back to this. And
that's why I feel important. They got a letter from the mayor. Now that I would.
And then the next thing you know, it's just they're getting your information. Right. So if you don't know somebody.
And that's a big red flag, right? Trying to get information from you.
Right.
We see that a lot. What's a refund scam?
A refund scam, it's kind of like a phishing scam. So they tell you that you have a refund. That could be one particular email that I was sent from somebody was that there was a double charge on their credit card.
Okay.
And so they wanted to refund the money to the credit card. So they asked for some personal information.
Yeah.
The funny part about the whole thing was that person doesn't bank with that credit. So they don't have that credit card.
Right.
So right off the bat, they knew it was not a legitimate one. But and that can come in many shapes and forms. The refund scam, that could be the utility, it could be a credit card, it could be the IRS, it could be anything. And the really difficult thing, and I also mention this to people, is don't just trust what you see on your phone. If somebody's calling you and it says, that it's Charles Campbell from the police department, anybody can spoof a telephone number and make it look like
and find out.
And make it look like they're calling from a telephone number. So
it's crazy what people can do. It seems so real.
Yeah, find a legitimate telephone number and then use that
and
to contact you. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw when you guys looked at the presentation that you do in the community, it talked about computer virus scams. And I recently moved my parents here not too long ago, and my mom showed up a few weeks ago and said, I got this notice on my computer that my spyware or antivirus where was, was expired. I clicked on it. People got access to her bank account. She had to close all the bank accounts. So tell us a little bit about that scam.
Yeah, that's funny because the same thing happened to my parents.
Okay.
So my dad got an email that said that his the antivirus software was overdue, and they needed to renew it. And so he allowed a person to have remote access into his computer. And the guy said that he would take $60 out of his account, and then he would install the software onto the computer.
So remote access is probably never a good idea.
Remote access is never a good idea. And so my dad, being the trusting guy that he is, saw that the gentleman made a mistake and accidentally put $6,000 into my dad's account. But what that was is he had taken it out of my dad's savings account and moved it to his checking. So thankfully, they figured it out before it got too far. But they had to go and reset all their passwords. They had to pay somebody to remove and re-download their operating system.
Clean up
their computer. So even though they didn't lose money that way, they still probably spent about $300 to $400.
And time,
And the timing, correct.
Just the whole, I think, fear and kind of trust that it breaks down. Do you find the banks, are they typically cooperative if someone's made scams like that?
Once we're involved in it, then the banks work directly with us. So that's why.
So another reason to call you.
They may require some sort of documents that there's an investigation going on so that they will go back and release your funds and do those things. One of the other things to look for is people will get emails that say, we're controlling your computer at this time, and we've got all your personal information, and if you want it back, pay us. Again, don't do that.
Right.
Because what they're wanting you to do is pay them with a card or a credit card or something that they can continue to use.
Then they have access to.
Business accounts, they do go in and, of course, take control of it. But most private,
they're not really doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's another scam to watch out for.
We talked about sort of with the older adult population, kind of preying on their vulnerability, the fact they're lonely sometimes. And I've had this one, but this one's always so sad to me, the grandchild scam. Talk about how that works.
Right. So that one, again, is grandchild scam, but it's really anybody who you care about.
Right.
And what they do is either call up and pretend to be that person, which is really scary because a lot of the presentations I do, people that fall victim to that say the person sounded exactly like their loved one. But it's either that or somebody calls and says that their loved one's in trouble, right? It's usually something like an auto accident or they got arrested or something like that. And, again, with a grandchild scam, they don't want their parents to know. So they're asking their grandparents for money. Right. And they said, please don't tell mom and dad. And usually, again, they play on their emotions that the grandparent doesn't want their grandchild to get in trouble. So they'll send them money. They'll buy gift cards. They'll do all that. And then.
And some of them we've had, they're calling the person in the middle of the night. Right. So they catch them off guard. They're asleep.
A little disoriented.
Really alert, may not have hearing aids in or whatever the case may be.
It's not only that they'll do that, but your loved one's in jail or arrested. Right. It could be you have a grandchild that's in college. And it's, I'm in this situation. Could you send me money? Those types of things. So it's anything that, like you said, just pulls on your heart.
Yeah, and they want to help and keep the grandchild or whoever the loved one is out of trouble.
And the sad part is that, I think the biggest flag for us is if they're asking you for a credit card right off the bat, most places don't do that. But the biggest thing to look for is those cards. I know we've talked about it multiple times.
That's
I think it's worth reading.
Yeah, repetition is good.
But green dot cards are not the answer to the world.
Okay.
I believe it is. So.
Do people still ask for wire transfers? I've had that happen over the years, but has that been replaced by gift cards or do you still?
Yeah, a lot of it has because that stuff can be tracked better. So now it's mostly just go to Walmart and get the cards. I will say this, though.
Okay.
Because there's so much information around about this now, banks have really gotten really wise to this.
Good.
And Walmart's even got really wise in other places. So if they see a senior citizen come in, they're all of a sudden just making large withdrawals that they've never done before, or they go into Walmart and they're buying these green dot cards, then they're saying, hey, what's going on? They're stopping them. They're asking them, and they're saying you're being scammed. So there is help out there because it's
more awareness is probably key.
Right. Yeah. But we don't want to just kind of paint it in the picture that it's all over the phone, over a computer, send money here, send money there. We have had incidents where it's take this money out of your bank and meet us here.
Right.
Deliver a box here. don't ever do that.
What about the door to door? I've heard, especially like after storms or natural disasters, it may get people door to door saying they have
so
damage.
it's you come up and you have damage to your roof and we'll fix it, or we'll clean up the debris and cut up the trees, but we need you to pay us up front.
Right.
Or we need you to pay half of it up front. Then they never show back up. That's pretty popular.
Okay.
The state does really good about putting those things out right after a storm or after a big event, but there'll always be several victims.
So if somebody approached your door, it'd be better to say, thank you, I'm going to get a couple quotes.
That's right.
I'll get back to you, or can I have your business card?
And so most cities, and Southern Pines is one of them, there's no door-to-door solicitation.
Okay.
So that's something.
That's the first red flag, then. They shouldn't even be at your door.
Yeah. So if someone calls, you can always, again, call us so we can contact the town and make sure there's nothing that's been permitted or anything like that.
Okay.
So that you know.
Right. It's better to ask.
And the other thing is, too, is just pass information along. If somebody's called you, tell somebody else not to do this. It was funny, a couple of weeks ago, I got a call, and it was from the Border Patrol.
Okay.
They said they had a package in my name, and I was supposed to come pick it up.
You're like, this is quite a journey for me. But
yeah. And I said, well, because they want to ask you questions.
Right.
I said, well, what name's on the package? And the guy said, Michael. And I said, well, how's it spelled? And they couldn't spell Michael. So
they picked the wrong guy to try. Well, let's get him over.
Just again, sometimes don't give personal information. Ask a couple questions that the person, if they know you, should have this information.
Right.
And that'll tell you
if something doesn't feel right, isn't it? Yeah. So this is one that we see, a lot lately, and it surprises me. It doesn't. So a romance scam. So again, we've talked about the vulnerability. Sometimes somebody's feeling lonely. And so I've seen a lot of online, especially kind of romance scams. We've had several clients that have given $50,000, $60,000 to someone who's their boyfriend. Right. So what do you all see with that?
So, yeah, I mean, the scary thing about that is it's not like the one and done, like a lot of these scams are.
Yeah.
They're in it for the long haul. So they'll spend sometimes weeks up to months building a rapport with the person. But it kind of always goes the same. A lot of it has been military wise lately. They think they're talking with somebody in the military. And, the next thing you know, the person wants to visit, but there's a problem with their visa. They need money. They need money for a ticket because they don't have it, or there's a legal problem, or the organization where they're coming from needs money for them to go. And they keep trying to get more and more until usually either the person doesn't have any more money or they figure out that they're.
And then they move on.
Yeah.
And a lot, one of our clients we've been dealing with, and it's been such a sad situation, but like you said, the military, she believes wholeheartedly she has two different male friends who are both generals in the military, and she is willingly helping them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, what, if somebody is voluntarily giving away money. In this particular case, we had to get the court involved and do a guardianship hearing. But in other cases, if somebody is competent and willingly giving that money,
so you have to, it's harder for us to prove that. We have to prove that the person didn't understand that they were being, the fraud was being carried out against them, because really and truly, it's not illegal for me just to give you money, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that we have to prove.
Okay.
And a lot of times those are difficult. I will tell you, the romance scam happens.
Yeah.
But it's very underreported.
I bet.
People don't want to come in and say, I thought that I had met Mr. or Mrs.
Right. I'm sure it's
happened. I gave them all this money. So it's very underreported to us a lot of times. And we would encourage it, simply because we do find those are the larger scams.
Definitely. And the more information collectively the law enforcement has, then the more they can see the trends. And pick up on that.
That's right.
Mail fraud and stolen checks. This, I know in our area, there's been some, and again, any age it can happen. I had a couple of people that had checks that were stolen, and the reproductions looked very, very real.
That's right.
What are you all seeing with mail fraud and stolen checks?
So some of the things that we're seeing is, we had a rash not long ago where mail is delivered and taken out of the mailbox immediately. We find open envelopes, any mail that was in it or checks that were in it are taken and cashed. We're not seeing the reproduction of checks as much, just the creation of accounts through the account numbers, those types of things. The reproduction of checks is like I said, we don't see a lot of, but every once in a while.
You'll still see that.
Because you can track that more often than not. And what they do is they like to take those checks and go straight to the bank. And of course, at the banks, they have cameras. And so that's, so it's difficult to pass those. But they will open accounts based upon the account information they get off of the mail. And that happens 2 or 3 times a year. And you'll be surprised. It's people that don't live in our area.
Right. That just come and target.
Right. They know that Moore County is an influential community. They know that we do have a senior population and a military population, and they target them.
Mm-hmm. That's
one of the things you can do to help with that too, because it's easier to wash a check.
Okay.
If you use a ballpoint pen, if you use a gel pen, it's much harder for them.
Gel pen.
Yeah.
Use gel pen.
Much harder for them to wash a check with a gel pen. So.
It's crazy to even have to think about all of these different things. And like you said, as an older adult, these aren't things that maybe are around in their younger years or things that they're tech savvy about.
Right.
But the giving information over the phone. So we talked about if someone's asking for, because I've had this call in the last week too, I think I just made a mistake. I gave somebody my social security number. I gave them my Medicare number, that type of information. If somebody is asking you for it over the phone.
Sure. So most places that call you won't ask you for your social security number. They may ask you for the last 4.
Right.
They may ask you for an abbreviation of it, but they typically don't ask you the full information. Or they may say, could you verify your year of birth?
Okay.
Most places won't ask you your whole birth date. Now, in person, you're going to be asked those questions. But over the phone, you're typically not going to get a representative that's going to ask you.
So somebody's doing that again, that sort of.
That's right. So the biggest thing in any of these is if you get those callers that you're not certain about, start asking them questions.
Right.
Eventually, you'll figure out that it's not unrealistic. Or number 2, you'll realize, okay, I need to get off the phone with this person.
Yeah.
So the other thing is we notice a lot, especially on the scams about wanting to get the green dot cards and things of that. They have different dialects.
Okay.
Different nationality dialects. That's pretty common that we get reported to us. And I don't know how sometimes they do the voice like a grandchild. But,
right. Somehow they figure it out.
But that's what we get told. That's some of the things that you're looking for. So that's not a fail safe to say, well, I recognize this. But just, again, I ask the questions.
And like you said, which is a great point, I do the same thing now. If I get an email or something in the mail and it has to do with any of my accounts, one, I sort of hover over the address it came from. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't match the company. Right. Or like you suggested, if it's from Duke Energy, instead of just trusting that, hang up, look at Duke Energy's website and call them directly.
Right. And because a lot of times too, when I tell people this, you'll get an email that looks like it's legitimate, say it's from Duke Energy, and there's a telephone number on it. So you're like, well, I'll call the telephone number, but that's going to be a fake telephone number as well.
Right.
So it's best just to X out of that, and just look up the actual telephone number publicized for them, and then call them directly that way.
So what else do you recommend? I know obviously trying to report it, but what if the older adult themselves isn't willing to report it? Can a family member call and alert you, or do you recommend that people
they can. Anybody can call on their behalf.
Okay.
We just list them as the person who was the victim, and then the other person is the reporting person, which we got the information from. But it doesn't stop us from doing our portion of it.
Right.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, and it's not, thank you for having this, is not because you're in the business of this, but one of the things that we do highly recommend, because we see it a lot, is having a service such as yours that can help.
Can advocate.
Well, not just advocate, but help them navigate these things. And the reason I say that is an organization that vets these individuals, that help the senior citizens, that makes sure they're credible and things like that is a big plus. Because if I just go out and I'm a senior citizen, I just hire somebody, I think, well, they were really nice. They told me they would help me.
They could be scamming you.
They could be scamming me. And these could start missing from my house, those types of things. And we see that a lot. So companies who actually vet caregivers, I highly recommend for the senior population to use those resources, because there's that added, this person's been checked. This person's been vetted.
There's been some type of background check and some type of vetting. And the same with some of my care management clients over the years. I'll just help sort emails that, go through the mail and literally help them divide out, no, this is junk mail, this is real. Like, it looks so real sometimes that it's really hard. Why do you think older adults underreport?
Probably just the embarrassment would be my number one guess. Even though a lot of times they would tell us, well, it sounded so legitimate. I just wanted to help. I think it's just the embarrassment of not wanting to. The other side of it is, I think, and Bill and I were talking about this earlier, it's just, these things take time to report. They take time for us to investigate. There's numerous calls. There's numerous meetings. Sometimes they just don't want to go through that process. They don't want to tie up all that time. So, again, I think just the amount of time it takes to report it. And think about it. If I have some sort of fraud on my credit card or my checking account, now I've got to shut
you have to shut it down.
I'm going to shut my bank account down. And that's just, it's a hassle.
It is. I'm guilty of that. I'll be like, well, let me just wait and see if something else happens.
Goes up. That's right.
And I think it's hard, like in the ones I've dealt with, especially the romance scams, like you don't want to believe that was fake, right? You want to believe that was real because it brought some sense, of joy or something to you. And that's why you continue down that road. What are some resources, and we'll link them on the podcast as well, but what are some resources that people, websites, places they can go to look for information on common scams?
So I always recommend, my top 3 are AARP.
Okay.
Is a very, very good one. The Federal Trade Commission and the FBI.
Okay.
All 3 of those sites, you could be on there for days reading.
So they talk about the different scams.
They talk about scams, how to prevent it, what they look like. And a lot of times I recommend to people, if you think you're being scammed, go check that out and see if it fits one of those, categories.
Yeah, Google it. Is this a common scam?
Right.
Yeah,
and sometimes it'll pop right up. Yep, that's the scam that's going around right now. So there's other ones, Department of Justice, Department of Public Safety in North Carolina. There's a lot of good resources out there. I would stick more towards like the AARP and the government ones. They tend to have what's up to date right now.
Okay. And I know you do presentations, and I'm guessing most law enforcement departments have some community liaison.
Yeah.
And is that a part of what that role is?
Yeah. So we actually, back in, I believe it was right at the end of COVID, the chief had kind of said, hey, scams are up about 200% from where they were before. So we need to get a handle on this. Would you put together a presentation? Okay. So we put together a presentation, and I probably went out maybe 3 dozen times now to give the presentation to different communities and organizations, just to make people aware, because it's much easier to prevent one from happening than to try to prosecute it and have somebody get their money back and
just bringing it out in the open and letting people share. Then they don't feel like it's just them that was targeted. Are people surprised by what you present? Do you find?
Sometimes, it's easy to armchair quarterback these things.
Right.
To usually when you talk to somebody who has been scammed, afterwards they're slapping their head going, I can't believe I did that. I know better than to do that. But at the time, the scammers are good at what they do, right? They get you emotional, they get you worked up. You have to work quickly and do this and that, and you don't have time to stop and think about it. So that's what I always tell people. But yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised by some of the local scams and the amount of money that has been lost by it, because some of them are quite a bit. But yeah, people always get a little, there's some laughs when you tell people, have you ever gotten a phone call from yourself?
Right.
And it happens. I've got a few of those. They try to spoof numbers and they use local numbers. Well, every once in a while, they're going to just send you your own number. Yeah. So, and I usually get 1 to 2 people in every group that says, "Yep, I've been called."
That happens to me.
Yeah. So
more common than you would think.
But yeah, people are usually pretty. It opens up their eyes, but they're very thankful for us to come and present it, because
that's a great service.
Right.
Any other tips or things you want to add?
We've talked about the different organizations and things you can look at, but also if they have some connection to the local news.
Okay.
Law enforcement agencies, I know, South Pines, Aberdeen, Pinehurst, the sheriff's office. If we get a lot of calls about scams, we try to put out a press release to get that information out there. So keep checking the local news to see if something's come out there. But don't think that this is a one and done. These scammers are pretty intelligent in the fact that they hit something really hard for a short period of time, and then when everybody catches on, they change really quick. Okay. So it's important for this.
It's always evolving. There's something new coming
out. Not to think, well, that hadn't happened to me, because the next one will be coming. So
One thing I will add, because we were talking about wire transfers and green dot cards, one of the things that we've seen an uptick in lately is the cryptocurrency. So there's actually some like ATM style machines around where you can buy and sell cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And so they're doing that a lot more.
I've seen that too lately. And it's really hard to tell, like if somebody comes to us and they think they've wired money somewhere legitimate,
right,
to buy crypto, and they've got these wallets out there.
Right.
It's very hard to tell what's legitimate and what's a scam. Right. But like you said, it's something that a lot of times they're doing it repeatedly.
Yeah.
And that makes it really, and believe wholeheartedly that that's legitimate.
Right. Because it's the same thing. Basically, the process with the gift cards and cryptocurrency are the same. Is that when you buy those, let's say you put $500 on a gift card, you will read off the numbers of the gift card to the scammer, and they immediately wipe the card. You still have the card in your hand, but now there's nothing.
But now there's nothing on it.
And with cryptocurrency, you have a wallet ID.
Right.
If you give them that wallet ID with the money, or what money's on it, they can use that to drain that money off. And
so crypto may have really been purchased, but you're giving them access to it.
And then they're taking it out of that wallet. Okay. And now you have nothing in there anymore. So,
well, there's a lot out there. So I appreciate you all coming and sharing with us today. Hopefully through more community education and awareness, we can prevent some of this and at least help people be diligent in looking for those. So thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah, thank you.